Welcome to this explainer. Imagine, just for a second, sitting in the grand echoing halls of an ancient empire. The tension is incredibly thick, and literally, the fate of the known world hangs on a single, high-stakes conversation. What we're diving into today isn't just some dusty ancient text. Oh no, it's an absolute masterclass in crisis negotiation, diplomacy, and the desperate, frantic attempt to stop a catastrophic disaster. We are going to break down exactly how a legendary elder statesman used cold logic, sheer leverage, and the heavy weight of legacy to try and avert a world-shattering war. So how do you stop a devastating war before it even begins? I want you to put yourself in the shoes of a mediator for a moment. But actually, scratch that. You're not just mediating some typical dispute. You're stepping into the middle of a massive, bitter family feud over the control of a sprawling empire. On one side, you've got the ruling king and his incredibly ambitious sons. On the other, they're exiled cousins, who, by the way, have just miraculously survived an assassination attempt. The situation is completely explosive. Let's see exactly how our mediator, the revered patriarch Bhishma, handles the impossible. Right out of the gate, Bhishma establishes equal allegiance. On one hand, you have the sons of Gandhari, which includes the crown prince Duryodhana. On the other, the sons of Kunti, the Pandavas. He makes it crystal clear from the very first breath that he is a completely neutral mediator. He views both factions of his family with equal love and equal responsibility. He absolutely refuses to take a side, which, as we know, is rule number one in effective crisis management. Take a listen to this exact quote, which he addresses directly to King Dhritarashtra. "As thou art to me, so was Pandu without doubt." Pandu, for context, was the king's late brother and the father of the opposing faction. Before Bhishma delivers the incredibly hard truths he's about to drop, he expertly establishes a firm emotional baseline. He's essentially looking the king in the eye and saying, "Look, I loved your brother just as much as I love you, so you need to listen very carefully to what I'm about to say." Now that the emotional groundwork is laid, we move into the logical core proposal. Bhishma smoothly transitions to the actual negotiation, completely bypassing emotional appeals to dive straight into cold, hard legal logic. Here is where he corners them. Bhishma directly compares the two competing claims to the throne. You see, Duryodhana claims the empire as his paternal property, simply because his father is currently sitting on the throne. But Bhishma immediately counters this. He points out that the Pandavas have an identical claim to the empire as their paternal possession through their late father, the former king. It's airtight logic. If Duryodhana considers his current possession lawful, he has to logically concede that the Pandavas' original possession was just as lawful before him. You simply cannot have it both ways. Which leads us to this jaw-dropping number: 50%. Just let that sink in for a second. This is the incredibly simple yet bitterly difficult solution Bhishma demands. Conclude a treaty and quietly give the Pandavas exactly half the land. No complex divisions, no messy sub-agreements, just a straight split right down the middle based on their equal legal rights. Sure, it's a bitter pill for a greedy prince to swallow, but mathematically, it's the only fair solution to an impossible paradox. But you know as well as I do, logic alone is rarely enough when you're dealing with power-hungry leaders. So Bhishma shifts gears, and we enter the assassination subplot. The text suddenly turns into this gripping true crime narrative nestled right in the middle of a diplomatic speech. Let's walk through this crazy timeline together. Step 1. An assassin named Purochana, who Bhishma rightfully calls a wretch, sets a deadly fire at a house where the Pandavas were staying. Step 2. For a long time, Kunti and the Pandavas are presumed totally burnt to death. Step 3. In a massive twist of fate, Purochana himself perishes in the fire without actually accomplishing his goal. And Step 4. The Pandavas dramatically reappear, very much alive. Now, this failed assassination plot created a huge vulnerability for the king. Why? Because everybody knew who actually ordered the hit. And that brings us to the concept of evil repute. In our modern terms, we're talking about a catastrophic public relations crisis. The world doesn't just blame the hitman. No, they hold King Dhritarashtra and his son Duryodhana infinitely more guilty for the fire than the actual arsonist. Why does this matter so much? Because a king rules by the consent and respect of the people. The king has a massive PR nightmare on his hands, and the miraculous survival of the Pandavas, that is practically his only get-out-of-jail-free card. And Bhishma does not sugarcoat it one bit. Listen to this powerful accusation. "The world doth not regard Purochana so guilty as it regardeth thee." He says it straight to the king's face. Bhishma is ruthlessly wielding public perception to corner the king into signing this treaty. He's effectively saying, look, the whole world knows what you did. Your reputation is entirely in ashes, and the literal only way to clear your name and wipe away this evil repute is to welcome them back and hand over their half of the kingdom. Having applied maximum political pressure, Bhishma now elevates the conversation. We pivot from gritty political leverage to the true lifespan of a leader. He dives into a soaring philosophical climax about legacy, honor, and the historical weight of the Kuru race. Notice this profound statement here. A good name is indeed the source of one's strength. The absolutely crucial point is that in high-stakes leadership, honor isn't just some nice-to-have moral luxury. It is the literal, functional source of a leader's power. Without public trust and a good reputation, your authority completely crumbles. Bhishma is reminding the king that by clinging to stolen land, he is destroying the very foundation of his own strength. And he follows it up with this incredible one-liner. One liveth in vain, whose reputation hath gone. Let's unpack that because it perfectly captures the ancient martial belief that living in dishonor is a fate far, far worse than physical death. If your reputation is destroyed, if you're known universally as a coward, a thief, or an assassin, your life has lost its meaning. You are basically a walking ghost. This perfectly illustrates the duality of that ancient mindset. Living with fame means a man doesn't truly die as long as his fame lasts. His legacy keeps him alive, versus dying without fame, where a man essentially dies the very moment his good name is gone, regardless of whether his heart is still beating. I really want you to think about that for a second. How does this timeless truth apply to us today? Whether it's corporate reputation management, political legacy, or just how you're remembered by your friends, your name is your ultimate currency. Once it's bankrupt, all the land in the world won't save you. Okay, so after appealing to logic, weaponizing public relations, and exploring the deep philosophy of legacy, we finally arrive at the final ultimatum. Bhishma strips away all the pleasantries and lays out the undeniable, terrifying strength of the opposing side. Let's break down these final warnings because things escalate incredibly fast here. First, he points out the Pandavas are virtuous and united, which is a very dangerous combination for any enemy. Second, they are being wrongly kept from their equal share, giving them the absolute moral high ground. Third, and this is massive, he declares that even the wielder of thunder, the king of the gods himself, cannot deprive them of their ancestral right. And finally, if the king denies them, evil will befall absolutely everyone involved. The message is clear. Even the heavens cannot stop the united Pandavas from taking what is legally theirs. Watch how beautifully this builds to a crescendo. Bhishma structures his final demand as a series of if-then conditions. If thou actest rightly, meaning if you want to be on the side of justice. If thou do what is agreeable to me, cashing in every bit of his personal clout as the revered patriarch. If thou seekest the welfare of all, reminding the king of his absolute duty to prevent massive bloodshed, then give half the kingdom unto them. It is just a brilliantly structured closer. It frames the surrender of 50% of the empire not as a defeat, but as literally the only righteous, respectable, and safe choice left on the table. Which brings us to the ultimate question of this explainer. Are logic, a ruined reputation, and the philosophical weight of honor actually enough to stop human greed? We have just walked through one of the most brilliant, perfectly structured negotiations in ancient literature. Bhishma used every single tool in the box to stop an impending disaster. But I want to leave you with this provocative thought. When a leader is truly blinded by power and the insatiable desire to control an entire empire, does a masterpiece of diplomacy even stand a chance? Thank you so much for exploring this fascinating ancient masterclass with me today. Let that question linger as you think about the conflicts happening in our own modern world.